No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend.
Talking on it though, then
He
you
a
can't put
legend.
it up later.
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items.
What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and I'm pretty sure that I just recorded this video and it didn't work again, so I need to stop doing that. I'm just going to try to live stream everything from now on. So basically what I want to do in this video is talk about Doublelift and 100 Thieves. So the question that I'm going to try to answer is Doublelift a top 10 80 carry? Unfortunately, the answer is no. So I think a more fair question, and I'm sorry if I clickbaited you, but a more honest question is he a top 20 80 carry? So we're going to talk about, what's happened and what I think will happen. So first of all, the last time that Doublelift played professionally was at the 2020 main event of Worlds, and TSM went 0-6. Not really his fault specifically. It was more of a utility 80 carry meta, and that is not... what Doublelift wanted to do at that point in his career. He still thought of himself as a hyper carry, but it was a team with Spica that, he really was doing a lot of the heavy lifting for that team. But, that's in the past. So what can we expect of him now? I think that Doublelift is probably, not going to be the focal point of his team. 100 Thieves has Tenacity, Closer, Bjergsen, Doublelift, and Busio. So the idea behind this type of roster, I think, which is coming out slowly from the team themselves and also some of the players on the team, is that Tenacity and Busio are thought to have high mechanical upside and a lot of talent. So you want to build a roster around them that gives them supplements their lack of experience, and potentially shot calling and macro decisions. So having Closer is definitely a good thing. Closer is still mechanically good enough to compete at a high level. He is not good enough to win a world championship, in my opinion, but he's definitely good enough to win the LCS. Then you have Bjergsen and Doublelift, and I think Bjergsen and Doublelift at this point in their careers are very similar. I think that they both are liabilities in terms of upside. If you're looking for someone with a lot of experience and good decision making, strong game knowledge, and stuff like that, then yes, you can justify putting Bjergsen or Doublelift onto any team because they've been around for a very long time. But that's not really what you need at the international level. You need higher levels of talent, and I just don't think that Bjergsen and Doublelift have it anymore from a mechanical perspective. So I guess the best case scenario for 100 Thieves is that Tenacity is a very good carry top laner, that the meta is a very good top lane carry meta, where they can continuously push resources into the top lane and punish the enemy top laner, create a large disparity between that matchup, and then just win games that way. So is that going to be a viable strategy next year? I don't know. But that is probably the best case scenario. I don't see Doublelift being a huge carry. Just probably not going to happen. So the other part that I wanted to do in this video is try to rate him, rank Doublelift compared to all the other 80 carries that are in the different regions, and I'm going to try to make my argument for why he is not a top 20 80 carry in the world right now in the 4 major regions. So first of all, let's start in the LCS, and I think that the best 80 carry in the LCS is currently not on an LCS team, or at least not going to play this split, and that's Danny. I think that Danny is the best 80 carry. Prince and Berserker both have, a decent chance to be better than Danny this split or in the future, especially if he's not playing. But I think that Danny really does have something special, and it's unfortunate how that's all kind of gone from a mental health perspective. I think that's, something we shouldn't hold against him. So in the B tier, I think this is where Doublelift belongs, and the B tier, in my mind, for global tier list, I have it as S tier is these are worlds contending players that if you put them onto a team, you would assume that their team has a chance to win Worlds. I don't think that Doublelift is that. an A team or an A tier 80 carry would be an 80 carry that makes their team competitive internationally. I don't think that's really the case for Doublelift. I think that it's possible for 100 Thieves to compete against other teams internationally, but not because of Doublelift for the most part. So now we have players like Luger, FBI, and Tactical, and this is probably somewhat controversial. I think that Luger is better than Doublelift at this point. He had a pretty good year last year, and Counter Logic Gaming intentionally played around him. Then we have FBI. FBI, even when Doublelift was around in 2020, a lot of people thought that FBI was better than him. I do think that FBI is better than Doublelift, especially at this point where Doublelift hasn't played professionally for 2 years. And I think in like the best case scenario for FBI and the best case scenario for Doublelift, I think that FBI still has a higher ceiling. And now with Evil Geniuses, I think FBI has a chance to kind of prove himself again on an even better roster than what 100 Thieves had previously. So that'll be exciting to watch this year. And then we have Tactical, and Tactical I know is probably the least expected name in this tier because he has been on a bunch of teams that have struggled in the past couple of years, but he has still shown the extremely high upside, really great playmaking ability, does make some bad decisions at every couple of games. But the hope is that stops eventually, or at least that the decisions, the aggressive decisions that he makes helps more often than it hurts. And then the other 480 carries in the LCS, Yun, I don't know enough about him. Neo, I think we've seen his ceiling and not really a great player. Isn't somewhat interesting player. Like there was that one split, I think, with Dignitas where Neo had a bunch of over 10 kill performances, and that was like the Kaisa meta. So I think a lot of that had to do with the champion. And then in the F tier, I think we have Spawn and Stixay. I don't expect anything from Spawn or Stixay this split or in future splits. I think Spawn's like 24 and has never been a consistent high level player. So there's no reason to think that he is now in my mind. And if he does it, great, good for him, but I doubt it. So let's go over to the LEC. In the LEC, we have at least 3 players that I think are better than Doublelift. So we have Patrick, Upset, and Hansama. And again, Upset is not on a team currently, but he's still a better player than Doublelift. I think that if 100 Thieves had the choice between Upset and Doublelift, I would assume that they take Upset if he had like a passport and everything, or a work visa. Patrick, I think, is definitely better than him. Anybody who watches the LEC consistently would agree with that. I guess Hansama might be a question mark for some people because Team Liquid did underperform last year, and some people may blame Hansama for part of that. I think Hansama is a better utility 80 carry than Doublelift, and they're probably about the same from a mechanical perspective, with Hansama having a little bit of an edge. And then for like hyper carry upside, I don't think that either of them really has that anymore. But Hansama does have the Draven, which puts him in good matchup spots against hyper carries and utility 80 carries. Then we have a lot of other 80 carries I think are about the same level as Doublelift, and the 2 that I think are better than him are Neon and Comp. I think Neon and Comp both had really good years last year on decent teams, and again, if you asked the teams in the LCS who would rather have Doublelift, Neon, or Comp, most of them are going to go with Neon or Comp. Then we have other players who are a little bit older. Kabe, Reckless, Karzi. Karzi has kind of had a big knock on his public reputation. People blamed him for Mad Lions, and then Vitality kind of underperformed. I think it was strange how they drafted around Karzi a lot of the time last year with Vitality. Reckless, I didn't watch much Reckless last year. He was in the LFL. And then Kabe. Kabe is a good archetype for 80 carry. I think he's a better hyper carry player than Doublelift, but I think that Doublelift is probably a better utility 80 carry, and has had higher highs during his career. And then we have 3 players that I don't know much about Exakick or Jack Spectra. If they're young talented players, then okay, that's 2 more players who may be better than Doublelift. And then you have Crownshot. I think Crownshot's been pretty overrated for a couple of years, but hey, if you think that he's better than Doublelift too, then fine, doesn't really bother me. Let's go to the LCK. So in the LCK, we have 2 S tier 80 carries. I think that Viper and Gumayusi are both S tier 80 carries. Viper has consistently been a hard carry player for the past 4 or 5 years, and has been considered one of the best 80 carries the entire time. Gumayusi is a much younger player. with very high upside. It was on. It was on. It was being showcased at Worlds. Like, yes, did he have the best tournament ever? No. But if you left Worlds thinking that Gumiusi was the main problem or is incapable of winning a world championship, then we watched a different tournament. So those are the two S tier players. Then we have Deft, Aiming, and Diokdom in the A tier. I think that Deft, coming off of a world championship, I don't think that he was the most important player on their world championship team, but he is definitely good enough to be on a world championship team again. And I think that Damwon has the chance to contend for a world championship next split. Then we have Aiming. Aiming has been a consistently strong player for the past probably 4 years. Even when he was in the LPL and the teams were kind of struggling, he was consistently putting out good performances. I would definitely rather have Aiming than Doublelift. And then we have Diokdom, and it's kind of unfortunate because I think that Damwon's move to get Diokdom last year was very intelligent, and he was pretty good in that matchup against Genji. But ultimately, Ruler was a little bit better than he was in that match, and that was kind of the difference at the World Championship. But he's still a very good player, and I think he, still has upside. Where if a team with him makes it to Worlds next year, I wouldn't be surprised if they went far. Could he be the primary carry of a team? I'm not sure, but the Damwon team was set up well, where he was like the third option generally. And then we have some players that I don't really know a ton about. So this is where, you have to kind of make a decision. Would you rather have the upside of an unknown player, or would you rather have Doublelift, who I think has a capped upside? And we have Pays, Taeyun, Envy, and Vital. And then last but not least, we have Henna. And I don't think that Henna is better than Doublelift. I don't think Henna is very good. So far we have 5, 10, 15 AD carries that are as good, if not better, than Doublelift. And then let's go to the LPL. So last but not least, we have the LPL, probably the toughest domestic league in the world, and the deepest domestic league in the world. But I don't think that they're better than the LCK. I just think it's like a more interesting, like the best teams from the LPL and the best teams from the LCK are very similar. The LPL is just more interesting and more fun to watch. It's kind of not debatable, I think, at this point anymore. But in the LPL, we have 2 more S tier AD carries. I think that Ruler and Huanfeng are both S tier AD carries. Ruler, every year his team is making it to the World Championship, and they're doing pretty well. And most of the time, he is the focal point of his team. And then we have Huanfeng. Huanfeng's team did not make it to the World Championship last year because China's a tough region. Weibo Gaming kind of disappointed in general. But Huanfeng is a great AD carry, and if we get into another hyper carry meta, he's always going to be one of the best hyper carry players in the world. In the A tier, we have Photic, Jackie Love, Gala, Light, LWX, Hope, and Elk. I think that Photic did pretty well for Top Esports in general. No, he wasn't on Top Esports. What am I saying? For V5, yeah, Photic and PP God were pretty good last year. So their roster last year overperformed. I think that Karsa, Rookie, Photic, and PP God, you didn't really expect them to be like one of the best teams in China last year, but they were very consistent and very strong throughout the year. It didn't work out for them, but that's something that there's always going to be teams that look very good all year and then kind of disappoint during playoffs. But Photic did a good job, and he probably didn't get enough credit, I think, because Karsa and Rookie a lot of the time were not being drafted around, but were still getting the credit, where I think teams realized that Photic was kind of the more important damage dealer on that team. Then from Top Esports, we had Jackie Love. Jackie Love, is a former world champion. I don't think that he was the focal point of the Invictus Gaming team when they won the world championship, but he's still a very good, very aggressive AD carry. I would definitely rather have Jackie Love than Doublelift. So even though they're in the same tier, I know that I would pick Jackie Love over him. Or actually, no, this is a tier higher. So yeah, I would definitely rather have Jackie Love than Doublelift. Then we have Gala. I think that Gala is pretty overrated in general. His team often spoon feeds him kills, which is fine. Like that's a way to win the game. But even for someone like myself who doesn't like Gala that much, he is definitely a better AD carry than Doublelift, and kind of has been for the past 3 or 4 years. Like that's not a controversial statement. Then we have Light. I don't think Light is the reason that LNG had a bad year last year. They had super high expectations. Was it possible for them to really, repeat the previous year's performance? Like Tarzan, Doinby, Ale kind of slid backwards a little bit, but it's tough to kind of be that consistent in the LPL where there are probably between 6 to 8 teams who have a realistic chance of going to Worlds every year. Then we have LWX. LWX had a pretty surprisingly good year from my perspective. Even though FPX was kind of falling apart, LWX was consistently putting in good performances, and even showed like carry upside in some of their games. So I was pretty impressed last year with LWX in general. I was basically thinking that his career was sort of over, like because he had kind of stalled out and was hurting his team in general. But he really turned it around last year, I think. And then we have Hope. Hope and Missing were very good last year for JDG. I didn't think that he was one of the best AD carries at the World Championship going into it from a talent perspective, and I was kind of proven right. And then JDG went out and signed Ruler to replace him. So I don't know where Hope is going to end up, but he'll probably be on a pretty good roster because people think highly of him. And then we have Elk, and I think Elk is one of the most underappreciated AD carries in the world. If Elk was like in the LCS, they would undoubtedly be the best, I think. Like maybe Danny could be better than Elk at some point, but Elk right now is better than Danny, and Elk is probably still better than Prince, but that's kind of the level that Elk is at. It's just he hasn't really been on a good roster for a couple of years since he was on the World Elite roster that had Breathe and Beishang, and I think Missing as well. Like that was a good roster. It didn't work out, but they had a very good young core. It just didn't work out. So that's basically it. I wanted to make this video pretty fast, just to kind of get my thoughts out there. I think that Doublelift and the reason for picking up a player like Doublelift are apparent. Like, I get why you would want somebody with that much experience and name recognition, to like sell stuff, build your brand, or just like sustain your brand, and then hope that Tenacity and Busio can take this year, get a lot of good experience, and then find a new AD carry that unlocks the upside of the team. But while Bjergsen and Doublelift are on this roster, there's no chance of them being competitive at the World Championship unless Tenacity is the best player of all time. And that's, unlikely. So that's all you're getting from me today. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.